actually had it. What a change. It has been a hot minute since I filmed anything. Though the filming may have been halted, the reading was not. I have made my way through a surprising amount of books these last 2 months. So here I present to you my October and November wrap up. Also, Unhaul and mini haul. At the end of this video, I'm also going to talk about my reading plans for the last month of the year and what my goals are. So if you are in any way interested in that, stick around. Let me get into telling you the books I read this month and last month. We're going to start with the books that I unhauled because they are no longer physically present, and if I don't talk about them first, I will forget about them. So we're starting with the books that I didn't enjoy and that I unhauled and brought to the secondhand bookstore. Going back in time a little bit, I read the e.m.m.a.f.a.g.a.n books, the Inheritance Cycle, and I was a bit iffy about them, and I was like, will I keep them? Will I donate them? Will I bring them to the secondhand bookstore? And while looking at my shelves and the decreasing amount of space on them, I realized, given the opportunity to reread a book with my limited time, would I really go for a book that I didn't enjoy all that much? And you know what? I wouldn't. And there's so many books I would reread before I reread the Inheritance Cycle. So I was like, you know what? We had a nice time reading you, but I will bring you to the secondhand bookstore. And so they are no longer on my shelves. Second book, which I read but unfortunately did not enjoy during the month of October, was House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. This book was one that had been hyped up so much. Everyone who'd read it was like so intensely like drawn to it. And so I had very high expectations for this book. Everyone was like, it's so weird, you're gonna love it. And yeah, it was weird, but it was also really boring in parts. Like some parts were and I get that was like the author was mimicking the style of the story with the like narrative style. Like I get that. I get it. And yes, it was very impressively done, but also it was really boring and difficult to get through. Saying that there was parts of it that were cool, there were parts of it that were interesting, parts of it that were very mature, and all of these things combined kind of made me think, this is another one that I would not reread even if I had the time to do so. And so that is another one that I brought to the secondhand bookstore, and actually the person who was taking it in the bookstore from me was like, oh wow, did you not enjoy it? And I was like, no. And she was like, yeah, it's a bit weird, wasn't it? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, yeah, that's why I like it. And I was like, I know, that's what everyone says. Next book I read and didn't enjoy was Queen of Rune by Tracy Banghart. This was the sequel to Grace and Fury by Tracy Banghart, which is one I got in a Fairy Loot subscription box that I got for a brief period. While I enjoyed the first book and was surprised by how much I liked it because it's dystopian, and I was like, oh, it's dystopian, no. Queen of Rune, the sequel, well and truly killed it for me. Now I don't mean like it killed it, it was great. I mean like it like murdered that story. I was so bored of being beaten about the head with the point the author was trying to make. I feel like a little goes a long way when you're making a point in a story, and it felt like I was being battered about the head by like this very obvious point that the author was making, and it was annoying. And I was like, you know what, this is why I don't like dystopian books anymore. And I decided I would bring Grace and Fury and Queen of Rune to the secondhand bookstore. Moving on to the books that I read and did enjoy, yay. The first book I read and finished and enjoyed was The Lost Princess by Connie Glynn. I've been really enjoying this series. It's about two girls who go to a boarding school, and it's kind of magical realism, but it's also not magical realism. It is very, very sweet, and the writing is very lyrical, which is one of the things I like about it. I also have it signed, which is cool because Connie was at StepCon, which is an event that Easton hosts yearly, I think, but this is the first time I got to go, and I was so excited. Got some other books signed too, which was very fun. Definitely something I will be going to again. But anyway, this book I read, enjoyed it. Wasn't my favorite of the series, but still very enjoyable, and I liked it. The next book needs no introduction and no justification, and that was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This time I read the illustrated edition. Now my only complaint about these particular books, particularly this edition, I mean, is that they are huge and very cumbersome to bring with you. I brought this in to read on my break and lunch, and it just takes up a lot of space in my backpack. What can you say about a book that is a favorite that you reread? Of course I'm gonna love it. And I did. The next two books I read were Zenith and Nexus by Sasha Alsberg and Lindsay Cummings. Sasha, of course, is here on YouTube as well, and I think Lindsay has a few videos. I went into these books not really knowing what to expect because so many people have very, very strong opinions one way or the other on this duology. Now, this is a science fiction young adult duology about a group of space pirates, though I think that's kind of a loose term. Space, yes, pirates. So I went in not really knowing how I was gonna feel about it, and I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it. Now, I listened to the audiobooks but alternated between listening and reading. I mean, I obviously got the sequel and continued reading them, so I liked them. Now, were they my favorite ever? No. Still an enjoyable, fun duology, and I think that some of the reviews online might be a bit harsh for no other reason than who wrote them, which I think is unfair. Then I read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Again, this is the illustrated edition, and yeah, no, great. Illustrations are absolutely gorgeous. Jim Kay did a fantastic job. Next two books I read, and the last two that I finished, were Hero for Wandla and The Battle for Wandla by Tony DiTerlizzi. These are science fiction children's books, and they're illustrated, and they're really, really good. Now, these are a really fun series. The illustrations are gorgeous. Tony DiTerlizzi also illustrated the Spiderwick Chronicles, so if you liked his illustrations there, you are going to love these. They are heavy with the illustration, and I am a big fan. They're also a really quick read, very easy to get through, while also dealing with topics that children's books usually deal with, like finding yourself and finding a place to call home. And it's just such, it's so nice to read good books, isn't it? This next book is the one I'm currently reading. Haven't finished it, but I am like 20 pages from finishing it, and that is Onyx and Ivory by Mindy Arnett. Now, this is one that I got in a Fairy Loot subscription box. While I was like, dragons, that sounds good, yeah, like the synopsis sounds alright, I had very low expectations. I was like, you know, it sounds alright, but I feel like I'm gonna be disappointed with this book, which I don't know why I felt that way, because it's a stunning cover and the synopsis sounded good, and the author has like really good reviews on the actual writing itself, and I was like, okay, I guess it's time to read it now, and if I don't like it, I'll just bring it to the secondhand bookstore. From the first chapter, I was completely like engaged with this book. I was like, oh, next page, next page, next page, and by the end of the chapter I was like, you know, I enjoyed that, yeah. I've been enjoying this. I'm also listening to the audiobook because it is a bit thicker, and I'm trying to utilize audiobooks for the next month or so to try and get my TBR down to a much more respectable number. And that's been working for me. This book is about a girl who works as a message courier between different kingdoms, and there are dragons that come out, except they're not called dragons, they're called drakes, and they come out at night, and so all of the messengers and everyone basically has to get back inside the walls of the city by nightfall. There's magic and kings and queens and horse riding. I've not come to expect great things from duologies, I'll be honest, but this one has really great world building, and the writing is good, which is another thing that I don't know why I wasn't expecting it. It's a really great read. On to the next part of the video, and that is a mini book haul, and by that I mean mini books and also mini haul. Traded in some books to the secondhand bookstore and got some store credit, and I was on my way out and I was like, you know what? I haven't looked at the Penguin mini classics in a while, and I saw some books that I couldn't pass up, and considering I had store credit, I was like, hey, whatever, let's go get it. Two of these books I have already read, so let's start with those. Actually, I haven't read these in a couple of years. I read them for a university class, and the first one is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. This is a story about a woman who is unwell, and she is in her room recovering, and you don't really know like what the issue is. It kind of sounds like she might have had the flu. And as the story progresses, you realize that the woman may not be mentally well, and it's just a really fascinating kind of look into mental health, but also it is a little bit older, so I don't know how accurate the representation is, but it's also it's a really great story. I'm looking forward to rereading The Yellow Wallpaper. Next book is Lady Susan by Jane Austen, which is a Jane Austen classic. Duh. It's kind of told through letters, so it's an epistolary novel. I remember that word from the class. And yeah, it's just Lady Susan writing to various people, and it's all about the kind of like gossip and intrigue about a certain group of people. And it was fine. It's not my favorite Jane Austen book, but it is one of those books I was like, you know, I really want a copy of all of Jane Austen's books. Eventually I would like to have a complete set, and I don't really care if they don't match anymore. I feel like I'm kind of past the matching wanting phase of my book collection. I kind of like that they look a little disheveled. So we are brought to the 2 books, which are the unread books for this haul. First one is The Missing Girl by Shirley Jackson, who is the woman who wrote The Haunting of Hill House. And I read We've Always Lived in the Castle earlier this year, and I loved it. I actually fell in love with the book, and I was like, I need to read more by this author. And when I was looking at the books and I saw the name, I was like, I need to get that. And so I did. I have actually no idea what this is about. Absolutely none. You know, the description doesn't give much away. It says malice, deception, and creeping of dread lie beneath the surface of the ordinary American life in these miniature masterworks. So I don't know what they're about, basically. This next story is The Beautiful Cassandra, also by Jane Austen. Now this, I think, may be one of the very, very few Jane Austen works that I have not read. So I'm very excited to get to this one. Drunks, Poisoners, and Prison Breaks, written for her family's entertainment when she was a teenager. That's, I mean, I'm probably gonna like it, but it's gonna be interesting to see how her writing developed since she was a teenager to, you know, her works like Emma and Northanger Abbey and, you know, all of the more well-known Jane Austen books. Kind of come to the end part of the video where I talk about my plans for reading this next month. Only 1 month left in 2019. Can you believe it? One seems to be able to believe it. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? The goal for the end of the year was to get my TBR below 5 books. Now, I have just added a couple of small ones. I'm not going to count these because I don't want to. Of the books that were on my TBR, I am currently at 6 books. That seems very achievable to me, to get from 6 to 5 within a month. Something would have to go drastically wrong for me to not reach that goal. But let me tell you how I plan on getting there. I'm more focused on finishing up series that I'm currently reading than I am of pushing through a ton of first books in a series, which is what the, oh, you can't see the TBR shelf. It's there. It's up there. There it is. Angelic lighting from above. I feel a bit like I'm talking to a shrink. My plan for the end of the year, today, tomorrow, and the next day, maybe, realistically probably a couple more days than that, I'm going to be rereading The Prisoner of Azkaban. I'm going to be reading the illustrated edition because I just want to. I'm going to move on to the sequel of Onyx and Ivory, which is going to finish up that series. I am really delighted with my progress finishing series so far this year. I will then have 2 duologies left on my TBR. The first book in 2 separate duologies, should I say. Now, if I can just finish those 2 books and their sequels, 4 books total, by the end of December, I will be a very happy camper. And that's kind of it. I guess it's not as big an update as I thought it would be. I mean, it's still my goal for the end of the year to get below 5 books on my TBR total, like below 5 books, including these little mini ones, but I don't think these will take very much time, so I'm not too concerned about these. Also, on top of any books I get for Christmas, I know there's only 2 coming for me this year. Everything included, all inclusive, everything left on my TBR, be it novella, be it illustrated, be it Christmas gift. I would like everything on it to be less than 5 books. So there is a bit of work to do. There is a bit, but I'm not super concerned because I will have an Audible credit. I'll also have a reread. A couple of these are rereads, and I think that that's very achievable. Let me know what your reading goals are for the end of the year. I'm going to stop talking now because I haven't filmed in ages, and this is making me go a little crazy. I've re-said sentences so many times that they've lost meaning, and I feel like I've said or so many times. And so I'm going to say farewell. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I have for this video. Bye. Oh, and also, as a side note to a side note, I did NaNoWriMo and finished a few days early, and I'm 55,000 words in and still going strong. Don't know why I didn't mention that, but what is the secret success? Okay, that's it. Bye.